So I'm getting all settled into my new wood shop and it's going really well, but I found that I need some new workstations, some cabinets, and a new workbench for the new shop. In my last shop, I had them built in as part of the structure of the building, so I couldn't really bring them with me. I didn't want to go overboard and make a really fancy cabinet and workbench like I had before, though I can't imagine my workshop without them. I built them for myself to have a nice space that would inspire me, but you don't need that to have a good woodworking shop and produce fine woodworking. So in this video, I'm going to go through and show you how using just construction grade materials, plywood, 2x4s, a pocket hole jig from Kreg, you can make some cabinets that are really sturdy, they go together quickly, and are reasonably inexpensive. So let's get to it.
The basic idea behind the cabinet is it's just a box made up of two side panels. Each side panel is made up with two stiles that double as legs, and then two rails that have a rabbet in them. I'm using 3/4 inch plywood for my side rail, so that's the depth that I'm going to recess the rabbet on these rails. To find the height that the cabinet should be, I held my hands out and used a ruler to measure where I thought it would be comfortable to have the tool resting. Then just subtract the height of the tool itself and build the box to fit. With the plywood set flush and facing each other, the panels are joined together with two more rails. This will be the back of the cabinet, and these rails will receive another rabbet. By setting the plywood to the back of the cabinet in this fashion, we create a ledge toward the back which will support the shelf, and then the side panels will be set flush to that shelf so nothing will fall down in the cracks. To finish off the box, we put on the two front rails, with the lower rail being set at the same height as the rail in the back. That way when we put the shelf in there, it'll be nice and square and not leaning to one side. Oops, that's better. Next we stick a top on it. You can have the top flush with the sides, it can overhang, or you can build two of these cabinets and span them and turn it into a desk. I'm fortunate enough to have a large table saw, but if you don't have a large table saw, you can break down your material using your skill saw. Measure from the blade to the edge of the foot plate and then add that measurement onto the width of the material that you're intending to cut. If you don't have a track saw, you can use a level clamped onto the plywood as a straight edge, or you can buy a specifically designed item such as a clamp edge that helps cut straight, or just clamp on a 2x4. With the material broken down into more manageable sized pieces, you can take it to the table saw and refine the shapes, and then start getting the 2x4s broke down so that you can turn them into legs. Using a stop block on your table saw or your miter station helps ensure that you get 4 legs all the same length. Once you know how wide you want to make your cabinet, cut out all your rails and get them ready to receive the rabbet. I use the material, the plywood that I'm using in the cabinet itself, as a gauge to set the height and the width for the rabbet that I'm going to do. Setting it up this way does have one drawback, however. It ends up with a piece of wood that gets caught in between the blade and the fence. So be sure to have that fully supported all the way through the cut to avoid kickback. I then use a pocket hole jig made by Kreg to drill 2 holes in each end of the rails, and they get attached to the panels that we made up earlier. And then I drill a couple holes going up straight through the top rail, and that will help connect the top of the cabinet to the cabinet itself. And then just drill about 1,000 more holes. I find that there's no need for glue. The screws hold just fine, so it makes it really easy and really fast to just start sticking it together. Using a finish nailer, I tack the plywood onto the rails to help ease the assembly, but you can do it afterward. It's not a problem. Then it's time to screw it all together. You can see here that I didn't take my own advice and I put the back panel in backwards, so I didn't have a ledge. I ended up having to put a little cleat nailed onto the board for my shelf. Cut out a top, put it on there, and that cabinet is done and ready for service. You can put doors on it and pretty it up if you want to, but I find it easier to get at things if it doesn't have doors on it, and they work just fine. This cabinet went together a little bit differently. It was not going to have sides or a back, and it was just going to be 2 shelves and then a top to hold all my sanders. That one wasn't too bad, and I could move it around by myself just fine. Next was onto the workbench that I was going to use for my saw making station, and it was quite a doozy. It was a big one. Once I had the cabinet all put together, I had to figure out how I was going to get it back into the corner where I was going to keep it. It was really heavy and I couldn't move it by myself. Thankfully, I had my son around to help. It's really nice to have me time in the shop and work by yourself, but it's also nice to have a helper around once in a while. And with the new saw cabinet put in place, I could load it up with all my goodies. I think it'll work fine. The next cabinet I did was going to be for my flap sander. I wanted to be able to access room on either side of the flap sander, so I made this a really thin cabinet that would just stick out and get anchored to the wall. If you don't have one of these, I highly recommend it. They take hours of sanding off of every project. That looks like a pretty usable space to me.
So there it is. I hope that was helpful. They're not very beautiful. I could have gone through and done mortise and tenon joinery. I could have made them a lot more elaborate, but that wasn't the point. The point was to get to work and save my efforts for something that I want to make for myself or somebody else. They're not beautiful, but they're going to take a licking and they're going to be, they're going to do their job. One thing that I found over the last 4 shops that I've moved around to is that maybe built-in cabinets aren't the best solution. Just like in my tree cabinet where my tools, they're modular. I can move them around as I need them. Having modular stations for the tools that I have in the shop is also a good idea in case I want to change the way my workflow goes and I want to move some things around. So I hope this video was helpful, maybe give you some ideas on what you can do with your shop to get moving and get making some fine woodworking. All right, thanks, bye.